And a very big welcome, everyone, to Mobile Rolling, another episode of our podcast series here at the House of Chow restaurant. Again, a very big thank you to House of Chow here in Adelaide on Hutt Street for their consistent support of our program and, of course, the harness industry here in South Australia. We're joined today by Neal, and we'll be catching up with Ross very shortly after the intro for another big episode of Mobile Rolling. We'll be covering all sorts of subjects regarding the operation of HRSA. So stay with us here on Mobile Rolling. Well, Ross, thank you for joining us. Of course, it's been a chaotic couple of months with the whole coronavirus situation happening around the world. And of course, harness racing has been able to continue during this time, thankfully. And tell us a little bit more about the operation of harness racing during these unprecedented times.
Yeah, morning, Lachie. Yeah, for sure. It's been a challenging time. But as you say, we've managed to continue racing, which has been, I think a credit to everyone involved. And we've basically been seamless racing all the way through. And in fact, during the virus period, we conducted an extra meeting per week because we lowered our footprint or reduced our footprint on the ground. So it's worked really well, but there's been a lot of effort gone in, and that's gone through from HRSA staff through to the participants who have all complied and been more than willing to assist.
Yeah, and one of the things you must have been happy with is the quick response by participants and staff to adapt to these new procedures on course.
Absolutely. Yeah. There was some pretty stringent controls put in place, and everyone has bought into the what was required, and it was really which was required, and otherwise we wouldn't have been able to race. So, all credit to everyone for doing that.
So with this whole virus thing going on, of course, we have seen racing mainly at Globe Derby. We're all racing at Globe Derby, of course. So racing hasn't been able to take place at country clubs for obvious reasons. So what effect do you think that will have on the country clubs as a whole, not being able to race for this a certain amount of time?
Yeah, obviously it's disruptive, but we made the decision early on to restrict our activity to Globe Derby. The only club that was primarily affected as a consequence was Port Pirie, and they lost a few meetings, but we're looking to kick back off there at the end of July. So get back up racing at Port Pirie. That's our plan. It's been obviously a little bit disconcerting for those involved, but I think given the magnitude of what's happened, I think it's been the right outcome.
Another area you've had to reschedule is, of course, one of our biggest races. Well, one of our biggest race series is here in South Australia is the Southern Cross. Of course, we've had to reschedule that. Tell us a little bit more about the decision-making behind that.
Well, obviously, Southern Cross is a contributory scheme, and there are horses from interstate that come here. So we want to make sure that the owners and the connections of all horses had a proper opportunity to race. So it was inevitable that the series would have to be delayed. So what we've done is scheduled it for very late in October, which gives those that have got horses involved in the series time to give them a spell and bring them back up, and a good 5 months effectively to prepare for the race series.
Yeah. Like most businesses around the world at the moment, we've had to implement some cost-cutting measures to the sport overall. Tell us a little bit more about those.
Yeah, so obviously early on, with the TABs being shut, it was flagged that our income or our revenues were going to diminish as a consequence. So we had to take some affirmative action at the time, and there was a cut in stakes, and there was a cut in salaries and wages for our staff as well. So everyone from the directors down took the hit, but I think it's worked. It's been accepted by all those involved, and we just need to see what happens now as a consequence of the TABs. Hopefully will be opening very shortly. Pubs and clubs back up and running, and seeing what effect that has on our revenue coming out of which was very much an unknown.
Yeah, exactly. Now, of course, we're hopefully trying to get to the other side of this whole virus thing now. Tell us some of the goals for Harness Racing SA in the next 6 to 12 months.
Okay, so we've obviously the virus has given, I think, the world an opportunity to reset to a degree and refocus and look at the way we do our business. And like a lot of pundits are saying, it's not going to be the same when we get out on the other side. And I don't think harness racing or racing per se is going to be immune from change. So we need to be at the forefront of change, being able to adapt. I think one of the prerequisite goals of the HRSA board is to look after the industry in South Australia and promote the industry in South Australia and return as many dollars as we can to those that are actively involved. So that's going to be a strong focus of ours going forward in the next few months and in the coming years, is to increase the input back into those that are contributing so much to the sport in the state.
What do you think are some of the key factors to promote the industry in South Australia?
Obviously, horse numbers. With a nationally declining horse number base, it's going to be more difficult to procure horses and source horses. So, we need to ramp up our and reinvigorate our local breeding scene. But we also need more participants. That's a fact. It's no secret that racing relies on a historically aged population. With the bulk of people being at the wrong end of the age spectrum. So we need to attract more people to get them into the sport. We've got some coming through the pony trots, but we also need to attract new blood into the sport, and that's going to be a prime focus of ours going forward.
Now, there's been a bit of talk about plans to try and implement the pony trot kids and some younger participants into the sport through programs and stuff like that. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so we want to integrate the children coming through the pony trot straight into harness racing. Historically, there's been a little bit of a lull between when they finish there and when they start with harness, and we want to bridge. We've made changes to bridge those gaps so we can get them participating in trials at an earlier point, so that we get some continuity of people coming across. But it's not just the pony trot children; it's all the other people out there that are potential harness racing participants. We've got to bring in, throw a net around them and bring them into the tent.
Exactly right. And it's funny you say that, because of course you look at the pony trot drivers that were driving in the 80s and 90s, and a lot of those did make that transition from pony trot driver to the standardbreds. And I think since I've been calling, I started calling I think in about 2010. I think there's only been about 4 drivers who have really made that transition. So it's important to try and get those numbers up and to make sure kids are actually making that further step and wanting to be interested in harness racing.
Yeah, absolutely. We're competing now in a very diversified market for recreational, that involves recreational activity. And it's, we're all leading busy lives. That's a consequence of time, I think, and the generation changes. So it's difficult to get them, but it's not impossible. So that's going to be our challenge going forward.
It's the same with gambling in a way as well, because you're seeing so many different markets when it comes to sports betting and, people punting out there. It's harder to compete compared to the old days when racing was one of the only things people could really punt on sport-wise.
Absolutely. Racing was the only game in town.
Exactly.
And either that or an illegal two-up game or something, that was about it that people could gamble on. So now, you've got a range of sports, and not just national sports, global sports, and some of the lesser sports that you wouldn't have contemplated years ago, having a large following, particularly from a wagering perspective. Things like darts and that are very immensely popular now with people to bet on. So we're just one option of many. We've got to continue to try and remain relevant.
Exactly right. You've maintained a strong relationship with Tab and Sky Racing. Tell us about the importance of that relationship.
Yeah, we do enjoy a good relationship with both those organisations, and they're obviously interlinked. But Tab is our parimutuel provider, which run the totes. So that's important that we converse with those people all the time and look at innovations and how we can potentially grow our share of the market. But also Sky Racing, and as you've seen through the virus, we've picked up an extra night, which was Tuesday night. That has proved successful for us. We're now one of 4 harness meetings on a Tuesday, so that attracts those harness punters across. But we've got the luxury of retaining Tuesday nights till the end of June, and then after that we'll go back to Saturday, Monday. But we've always got to constantly look at the best times and dates available for us, and Sky are an integral partner in procuring those times and dates.
Talking about that, Tuesday night race meetings we've seen, of course, as you said, over the last couple of months is our 3rd race meeting, and we're seeing them progress throughout June, and then of course in July we'll be going back to our traditional Saturday, Monday time slots. But tell us a little bit more about how Tuesday nights have been performing turnover-wise, and how could you see that time slot being utilised in the future for harness racing in South Australia? Yeah,
well, Harness Racing SA used to race Tuesday nights some years ago. They weren't that financially successful for one reason or another. But as I said before, times change and habits and desires change and people's patterns change. So the Tuesdays have been pretty good for us. Obviously, you can't gauge much with the tabs being shut, but from our corporate partners, they're reporting that we're tracking as well as we can be on a Tuesday night, and our turnovers are relevant or relative to other meetings that are on a Tuesday as well. So it all goes well, but down the track, we'll continue to talk to Sky and we'll continue to look at options that best suit the industry going forward.
It's fantastic to hear. Now, do you think a lot of that has to do with Tuesday nights staying around that 4:30, 5:30 time slot?
Yeah, there's all different times.
Yeah.
People have done surveys of times when it's best and when it's best to race, when it's best not to race.
Yeah.
A year or so ago, we made a change on Saturday nights to starting earlier instead of starting at the traditional sort of 7:30, very late in SA, and going through till about 10:30, sometimes 11 o'clock nearly. Which, when you look at the eastern states, it's half an hour later over there. So, at that stage, the only people left in the hotels and wagering with the cleaners because everyone else had gone home. So we made the decision to start earlier, albeit on Sky 2, because of wagering preferences. So even, an example being that, 2 races earlier on Sky 2 are better than 2 races later on Sky 1. So we continue to look at those. So Tuesday nights, yes, have been good. I think they provide some continuity from the day meetings through to the night meetings.
Ross, you've obviously worked in a lot of sectors in harness racing over your time involved in the industry. You've had a couple of years now here in SA. Of course, your first tenure as a steward, you moved into a position as CEO. Tell us a little bit more about some of the challenges you've had to face over that time, and of course as well, like some of the things that you've learnt and some of the differences between working here compared to other harness racing bodies you've worked at.
The industry is full of challenges. As we stated before, the horse racing now is just one of a number of gambling options, and all our revenue comes from gambling, or primarily from gambling, 95% of it. So it's a real focus to stay ahead of the game all the time. And the challenges in my role have been, particularly in the CEO's role, is to continue to drive those revenue streams to support the industry, which is effectively to some people, or to a lot of people, their wages, which is stake money. So the biggest challenge is that we're challenged with declining horse numbers, which makes it difficult. We're challenged with an ageing participative base, which is also a challenge. But we want to make harness racing South Australia the best it can be, particularly for those, as I say, with the board's direction, looking after those that are looking after the industry in the state.
Well, Ross, keep up the good work. I know how hard you and your team have worked over the last couple of months. It's been a mammoth effort to keep harness racing up and running here in South Australia during this virus. So well done to you and your team, and thank you for coming on today.
Thanks, Bob.
Well, thank you for joining us again on Mobile Rolling, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back next week with another guest. Again, a big thank you to House of Chow for providing the location for today's interview. And thanks again for joining us on Mobile Rolling.